Hello everyone, my name is Jenna. I'm a professional dog trainer out of Southern California, and today I'm here to help you decide whether or not your dog is aggressive. Perhaps you believe or you have a hunch that your dog is aggressive, or perhaps someone has told you that your dog is aggressive, and I am here to give you a fine guideline to decide whether or not your dog is aggressive, or perhaps he's just reactive. So in our dog professional world, we have two different categories. We have reactivity and we have aggression cases. And we separate these two cases and these two categories in order to assess whether the dog, how far the dog is in his learning and how far he has to go to achieve his desensitization goal. Okay. The first disclaimer I have to give you is that unfortunately our industry does not have a clear set objective definition of what is reactivity and what is aggression. Unfortunately, every single trainer has their own interpretation, and so I'm going to lay out mine, and hopefully this will kind of give you some insight and you can reflect this on your own dog and decide where he is in his learning plan. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the commonality. How are the reactivity and aggression alike? The very obvious response is that both are emotional experiences. If a dog is reactive or a dog is aggressive, he is living in the back of his brain. He is living in the parasympathetic nervous system. And especially if it's a negative reactivity or if it's aggression, likely you're engaging his adrenaline and likely you're getting a fight or flight response. The biggest difference is that reactivity could still be happy. A dog could be overjoyed and be releasing a lot of dopamine and not cortisol. A dog could be very, very silly and still be reactive. So an example of this would be that you have your neighbor come over, and every single time your neighbor comes over, your dog jumps on her and submissive pees. However, reactivity could also be that every single time your neighbor comes over, your dog goes and runs underneath the couch and has a flight response. That's also reactivity. Reactivity could be that your dog goes and runs to the window every single time that your trash man comes and barks. That's reactivity. The way I sort of self-assess the difference between reactivity and aggression is that reactivity is very much living in the warning stages. Perhaps you're dealing with a negative reactivity. That is, the dog is fearful, the dog is frustrated, the dog is upset. The dog is probably lunging, he's probably barking, he's probably growling. He's giving a lot of warning to everyone around that, hey, you keep pushing me in this direction and I'm gonna have to choose my fight, right? I don't want to, because remember, no dog wants to engage in a fight. That is a myth. No dog is looking to pick fights with others. That goes against all natural evolution, okay? So the dog is trying to give as many warning signals as possible to not pick a fight, and therefore he's just reactive. So once the dog feels as though you've removed his flight option, that is because he's on leash or because you put him in a sit stay and you shouldn't have, once he feels like he no longer can flight and he's given ample warning and the stimulus is still coming at him, still in his perception confronting him, then he has to fight and he feels as though he has to defend himself. So that is that the dog has now air nipped, the dog has now perhaps scraped skin, the dog has injured, the dog has actively had to defend himself, and it's no longer a warning. That to me is aggression. The worst form of aggression is rehearsed aggression. So rehearsed aggression, you could say, well, you know, he goes over threshold all the time, he barks all the time. That's not rehearsed aggression. Rehearsed aggression is the dog, for all intents and purposes, being able to attack multiple times, okay? So I always picture in my mind a wrestler. The first time a kid decides to pick a fight on the playground, he's probably not very good at it. He probably is just having an emotional outburst. I mean, he could still cause some pain, but it's not a very strategic fight, right? But as the wrestler goes into more fights, and as he's learning how his body works, and as he's learning how confrontation works, now he's becoming more strategic, right? And now the fight has become more methodical. And this ends up happening with aggressive dogs. Rehearsed aggression is that the dog becomes much more methodical in his protection, his defense. Okay? And once your dog has injured multiple people or injured multiple dogs or injured multiple bunnies, perhaps he has a really serious prey drive, once that happens, you need a trainer now. Go get a trainer, because your dog is dealing with some serious emotional trauma and feels as though he has no choice but to become very good at fighting. So we want to make sure that we're handling that. If your dog has not rehearsed aggression, or perhaps your dog hasn't even gotten a hold of any other stimulus, he hasn't, he barked at people and he's lunged at people, but it's not like he's even mouthed at anyone or trying to go on after them. If that hasn't happened, likely you're still in the reactivity stages. And if you're stuck in the reactivity stages, you still need a trainer. Please go hire a positive reinforcement trainer. Because you very well could be progressing into aggression if you don't handle it quickly. So these are ways to figure out whether or not your dog is reactive, whether or not your dog is aggressive. We always want to remember that either way, their dog is dealing with some serious emotional experience, and we want to help him through his emotions first and make him feel safe first before you deal with the behavior. That will be in a separate video to go further in depth, but I want you guys to always remember that if your dog is scared, if your dog is alarmed, if your dog is worried, he is not going to be reasonable enough to stay for you. It's not fair. Don't communicate to him as if he is. He's not living in the front of his brain where the reasonable part of his thinking is. He's stuck in the back. He is panicking. And especially if adrenaline's being released, especially if you're dealing with fight or flight, telling him to stay and be reasonable just isn't fair, and most importantly, it's ineffective. So that is my spiel on how to decide whether or not your dog is reactive or aggressive. I really hope this helped you. If it did, please hit the like and the subscription and hit subscribe. And if you're one of my current clients, please give your dog a treat for me and tell him Auntie Jenna loves him, and I'll see you guys soon.